Hey guys, Cass here, and today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in January. So, first of all, it's been a while. I haven't filmed for a few weeks. But yeah, I'm going to talk about the things that I read, but also the things I bought, because I only bought 2 things, so there's no point in doing a separate haul video. So yeah, here are the books. Here are the January books, read and hauled. So first of all, I read Broken Hearts and Zombie Parts by William Hussey. This is a contemporary and it's about this one guy who has a name, but I'm terrible with names. What is his name? Jesse Spark, that's the guy. This is about Jesse, and right at the beginning of this book, basically he's in the hospital having these tests because there's something wrong with his heart and he has to have open heart surgery in the very near future. So he decides to make this zombie film with him and his friends. They're very much a gang that makes all these different films, and he wants to get the film made before he has the surgery because he has all of these like worries and stuff about what's going to happen. And yeah, it's very much character driven. Obviously the whole plot about this film that they're making, but also this friend group, him and his 2 best friends, boy and girl, and there's some drama in there. There's always drama. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really good. I enjoyed the characters. The drama was a little bit dramas, but acceptably so. I did find it funny at one point, like at the beginning of the book, like, you know when on like books, TV shows, when people are very specific about things. So they really like films in here, obviously, horror films, zombies, but like every time he would mention a film it'd be like, oh yeah, the 1997 film Scream 2 by Wes Craven. That wasn't one, but that's just one that I know, so I thought I'd throw that one out there. But like, yeah, when they say all of the things, and it felt a little bit cringy, but also teenagers are cringy, so you know, it's like teenagers that discover that small band Nirvana, you know, it felt very that. But yeah, I did find that a little bit cringy, but it was like towards the beginning of the book it did that, but then it sort of petered out. But at one point, what film was it? I can't remember what film it was. Oh, Mike Myers, maybe. Anyway, he was going under a fake name, and I can't remember if it was Mike Myers, but I'm just gonna say Mike Myers. I don't think it was. No, it was Wes Craven. I mentioned him earlier. So at one point he's like pretending, he's got prosthetics on and he's pretending to be this old guy called Mr. Craven, because that's the first name that came out of his mouth. And then he mentioned they had a son called Wes, and then the person he's talking to is like, oh, like the director. And he's like gobsmacked. What, you know that guy? As if Wes Craven's not like one of the most known directors, especially talking to a middle-aged person who obviously would have been alive and going to the cinema watching his films at the time of them growing up. It was just quite funny, and again, it's like, it sounds a bit silly, but also that's what teenagers are like. They don't realise that people know stuff, especially older people. Like, what? You know that director who was putting movies out at the same time that you were going to the cinema as a teenager? That's so weird. So yeah, I did find that quite funny, but a little bit cringy, but in a way that is acceptably cringy because they're a child, a teenager being cringy. So yeah, but yeah, I really enjoyed this book. It was a lot of fun. Next up I have Wonders of the Impossible, that's not the right words. Next up I read Wonders of the Invisible World by Christopher Barzak. This one I had mixed feelings about. I don't know whether I just wasn't in the right mood or whether it just wasn't for me mostly. I enjoyed it, but I gave it a very average, maybe like 3.5. I can't remember off the top of my head. I feel like it was around about 3.5. But this is magical. I wasn't actually expecting that because I hadn't read the back. It's a book I bought a long time ago. But it's like this guy who has a name, Aiden, and he's like just living his life, going through his life. He lives on this farm with his family, his parents and his brother, and then he's just like living this life where he just goes to school, he doesn't really talk to anyone, he doesn't have any friends, he comes home, he does the farmy stuff and that, and then an old friend comes back to town and it opens up this whole world of him, how he's missing a lot of years from his younger time. He can't actually remember things. He finds pictures of like parties with people that he goes to school with now but he doesn't talk to, and he's like, I can't remember that, but here's like evidence that we did know each other. So there's like magical stuff going on. He has these weird dreams, his premonitions, he knows stuff, and his mum does as well, and then it sort of goes from there. So I don't want to talk too much more about the actual plot, but I don't know what it was. It was like, I don't know whether I wanted more. I don't know whether it was just like not written as engagingly as I would enjoy it to be. Oh, actually, one thing, his friend and then boyfriend, because they do get together, it's like, it happens quite near the beginning, so it's not a spoiler. Who has a name, probably? Jared. Yeah, I felt like he's a big part of the story, but he has no qualities about him in any way. It feels like, you know, when you have them characters that feel like as soon as they're not on their page, they're in a void waiting to be called upon by our main character because their whole life revolves around them. It was one of them. It didn't feel like there was enough about him as a person. It didn't feel like there was enough about their relationship and them. Like, some flashbacks, maybe that would have helped, of them at the younger times, because we're told that they were best friends, but our main character can't remember it, and then like nothing is done in the story to make the connection known again to us as readers. Like, maybe he feels it but we don't. And yeah, that was the main thing, I would say. He was an integral part of the story, but he was just like a wooden cutout to place the main character's feelings and thoughts onto. Like, they attempted to do something with his family. He lived with his ex-alcoholic mum, but then like that didn't really get into much. We don't really know about his past. We know, like, it gives you a little here and there, but just not enough substance for me. And there wasn't enough of those two together existing as two people together, rather than existing as two people trying to figure out our main character's life and what happened. It's all centered around him rather than them. So yeah, that was the main thing that I think let this book down, because it was quite interesting, like the whole magical things and stuff's going on, and there are some twists and turns in here and some family secrets and all that sort of stuff. So it was interesting in that sense, but yeah, I feel like there could have been more characterization for sure. Next up, I'm just going to talk about all three of these at the same time, because it's 3 volumes of the same series and I can't tell you what happened in each of them because it all just melded into one. So I reread the first volume of Y the Last Man. This one is called Cycles. No, it's not. That's the third one. This one is called Unmanned. The second one is called Cycles. That's what I just saw. And then the third one is One Small Step. So in this universe, it is set in our universe, in our world, but there's some sort of deadly thing that happens. We don't know what, why, how, where, when, but like at a certain point, all of the men just died. All of the men died, all of the male mammals died, but there's this one guy, our main character. He is the last man. That's why it's called Y the Last Man. And he has a pet monkey who's also male. So these are like the last 2 male mammals in existence. And it's like trying to figure out what's going on. Why is he there? Why is he immune to something that killed the men? Why did the men die? But then obviously there's a lot of hostility. Some women want to help him, some women want to kill him, some women want to take him for their own, some women, you know, there's like a lot of different angles here. And then there's a bunch of family stuff in here as well. His mum, his sister make appearances. And yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. I think I own up to volume 8, so I'm definitely going to be carrying this on in the very near future, so I remember what's going on. But yeah, it's very interesting so far. A bunch of stuff's happened. We're trying to figure stuff out and things and stuff and everything. So yeah, obviously there's a lot of like political unrest. So a few of the things, this was written quite a while ago, but a few of the things do feel very relevant and current. So for example, there's like a whole Israeli presence, the women coming over and trying to take him, and like their whole thing is wanting to make war carry on, so there's no infighting in Israel. They want to always have a combatant, and I thought that was very like interesting, considering, you know, real life, always trying to fight people. And there's also like, there's, what are they called? Not conservatives, what are the American versions? Democrat and Republican. So the Democrats are in power, and at one point like a lot of the Republican wives are coming and trying to like overtake the government because they feel like they should get their husband's seats, because they're like, oh, there's loads of Democrats, that's the right one, there's loads of Democrats in there and we want our right, we want the Republicans in. So there's like that whole fighting politics as well happening. So, you know, very interesting. And definitely want to carry it on. And I'll show you the artwork, because I always do that when I'm reading comics. There you go. This sort of artwork. And then the last thing I read was on my Kindle, so I'm just going to remember what it's called. It's called All the Lies They Did Not Tell by Pablo Trincia, who was Spanish and translated by Electra Pauletto, is what I think those words are pronounced as. But yes, this one was for the Buzzword Readathon challenge. The challenge for January was the word truth or lies, and obviously this has the word lies in it. Now this one is a non-fiction about satanic panic, basically, in Spain. Was it Spain or was it Italy? That's really bad that I can't remember. It might have been Italy. I think it was Italy, not Spain. I'm gonna say Italy. I think it was Italy. But yes, so this one was, I had mixed feelings about it. The first half of the book was very slow. It was very hard to read because it was very dry. It was very much, here's a person's name, here's another person's name, here's a child's name, here's another child's name, here's stuff that happened, we'll throw in another name. Some of the old names are coming back in now, but you can't remember which bit links to them because here's 10,000 names thrown at you and places and situations. It was a lot of information just thrown, the first half of it. It was quite a slog to get through, and I was like, who is this person? And obviously as well, because they're not like familiar names to me, it was even harder to keep track of. I feel like when names are like within what you're used to, you know, if there was like a Smith and a, I've got Derek in my head, but one of them was a surname and one of them was a first name. You know what I mean? I feel like it's easier to keep track of names that you're familiar with rather than names from different countries that, I wouldn't say blend into one because they are quite different, although they're not, because one was like Giovanni, one was like Giovanni, and then there was like a different one. They were quite similar. But after we got through all that slog, I thought I was going to give this 3 stars, but in the end I actually gave it 4 stars because when I got past all of that, the last half of this, maybe the last 30%, was so interesting, so fast paced, so like full of information, and also about a topic that I don't know anything about. I feel like this could probably be easier to follow if it was like a video podcast or something with pictures with the names. It might be easy to follow, but because I had absolutely no idea about this case, it was extremely interesting when it got to like what was going on. But anyway, I feel like I've said loads of words but actually told you nothing about anything about what this book was about. So basically in the, I want to say the 90s, I believe it was the 90s, a child was taken by social services and was like interviewed by this psychologist woman, and basically was like, yes, my family are abusing me. And then it went into, oh, all of these other people that they know by the family, here's a random name I'm going to throw out there, stick it to a person with a name similar to that, and they were in on it as well. We went to a churchyard, we dig up grave. Like, this kid was saying loads of crazy shit. The kid said that he'd murdered loads of children, that he was in all this satanic weird cult thing, that they would go to the church every night and dig up bodies, even though like there was no evidence of anything being dug up. And it just snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. There was this whole thought process at that time that kids are always right, kids don't lie, so everything they're saying is true. So many families were destroyed in this. Like, other kids would get involved. This kid would say, oh yeah, Janine from down the street, she was there and her family's involved. So the police would go and take the child from the family instantly. Just take the child, don't let the family see them ever again, move them to a different place, berate them for month and month and month until they corroborated the stories, and then went in on loads of more crazy stuff, and then again it snowballed. They mentioned somebody else. Like, this kid, I don't know how they believed that this stuff was happening. Like, this kid had like 10 different schools because he kept telling them like, oh yeah, Giovanni and this other dude that was the heads of this cult, they keep coming into school and finding me and then taking me and abusing me and then bringing me back to school, but even though no one saw. So then they'll move to a different school. And at one point, like, there was, because this is all written from like the guy who wrote this, he found out about this and he went around and he was trying to find out information about what happened. Like in the more modern times, he was going around, he was trying to find these children as adults, he was trying to find the other adults that are involved, he was trying to interview loads of people. So it was very much that sort of way that this story is told. But at one point he interviews one of the ex-heads of one of the schools, and she said the first time she ever met this kid, like he'd been there for a month or two, and he asked her what her name was, and she told him, and he was like, what's your first name? And she told him the first name as well. And then he went home and he said, oh yeah, Mrs. Bloody blah blah blah, she's part of it. Like, she didn't get done, but like, if the kid is saying this sort of stuff, would that not make you second guess all the other things that he said? But yeah, it was absolutely mental. But obviously, because I didn't know anything about this case, at the beginning it's very much like showing you both sides of the story. So it talks about this medical evidence. It said a bunch of the kids had physical evidence to suggest that they have been very heavily abused, like in the areas that you don't want to see that sort of evidence. So as I was reading it, I was like, all of this sounds so far-fetched, but also there's physical evidence, so something must have happened. But then like later on, as it's going into the trial, every other medical professional was like, I don't know what this woman is talking about, there's literally no evidence on these pictures. And like the doctor woman or the nurse or whoever she was that said that all of this thing happened, she was also on record, she'd also been like on other trials later on, they'd completely dispelled her, she was chatting absolute bollocks. And also said that if the hymen breaks on a period, it will grow back. Like, she's said some crazy shit, she doesn't know what she's on about. It's absolute madness. But yeah, it's just crazy what a few things people can say. And like these psychologists who were very much pushing, they weren't, hey kids, tell me your experiences, they were, hey kid, I'm gonna berate you for months and months and months, and we're gonna say all this crazy shit's gonna happen. Like the guy who wrote the book, as he was doing research and stuff, a lot of the parents had kept loads of the like what went on throughout this time, a lot of information, because they wanted all this information. And there were like videotapes of when the judge went to meet these kids before the trials, and like in the tapes the kids weren't saying anything, and then the psychologist was like, oh, we'll go and get an ice cream if you just tell them this. Like, they were trying to bribe them into saying stuff, and then if they didn't say stuff, they were like, well, you're not getting this then if you don't tell them. It's like madness that they were allowed to get away with this. And like I said, the kids were literally saying, oh yeah, my parents and all this cult made me murder loads of babies, we used to dig up graves every night, had these massive bonfires. Nobody in the town had ever seen a bonfire at night in this church. The church had houses around it. The guy who wrote the book even went to the house closest to the church, like 200 metres away, and the woman lived there. She was like, yeah, I lived here when that case was going on. The police never came and asked me if I saw anything. It's mental. And bearing in mind, like, a bunch of these people did go away. They did go to prison. Several of them committed suicide because of this massive case against them, saying that they're satanic children abusers. It's absolutely mental. And like in that last 30% of the book, it was also talking about how this phenomenon was something that was seen all around in different countries at this sort of similar time, the 80s and 90s. Satanic panic was massive. So in like America, in the UK, in other European countries, it was just like this thing that people were saying, like, oh, what was it? I feel like it was either America or Canada. There was this town or city or whatever, and the kids literally said that they were going to these daycares. I think it was in America, because a bunch of daycares around this time, or maybe earlier, were getting shut down, and people were getting done for crimes that were satanic crimes. Like, these kids were saying they went to the daycare, they got in an aeroplane, they flew to Mexico, a bunch of Mexicans on the border raped them, they flew back to daycare in the time for their parents to pick them up and then go on their way. And like, the authorities believed that. It's absolutely mental. It's mental, all of these different things that could go on just at the whims of children being forced to say stuff. Oh, I'm getting to that point. There was one girl towards the end, obviously he was trying to find these kids, he was trying to put them back together with their other kids, because they made sure if the kids have siblings, they went to different families. They specifically said they didn't want any of them to have any contact with any of their family. So like if there were 4 siblings, they were sent to 4 different places on purpose and not allowed contact. But yeah, there was this one girl, and she said like one of her cousin said that it was happening to her as well, so she got took away from her family. And the whole time she was saying nothing happened. I don't know if she was a little bit older than the other ones. I think she might have been like 12 or 13. This other kid, I think the first kid was somewhat mental, like 4 or 5 or 6, like really young, and all this stuff was getting pumped into him. But yeah, and the whole time she was saying like nothing happened. So they said that she was like conspiring with them. Like, oh yeah, you want them to hurt the kids, you're conspiring with them. It's absolutely mental. But yeah, it's a really interesting, harsh case. Like I said, some people died before the trials even happened, either commit suicide. Some people went to prison. Some people, I think, maybe even died in prison. Some people died afterwards. And obviously every single one of them kids have trauma now. Some of them still believe it. A lot of the kids afterwards don't believe that stuff happened to them. Some of them say, I know that stuff didn't happen to me, but I've still got the memories, because like memories can be implanted into you by accident. It talks about that whole thing where a book came out. I can't remember what it was, but there was a book that came out about this psychologist that did the regression on a woman, and then a woman came out with all of this stuff that happened to her as a kid. And then like a few years after that book came out, it was debunked that it was all memories that had just like been put in there. Whether it was on purpose or it's by accident, I don't know. But by that time it had sold loads everywhere, so everyone was thinking all of this regression stuff was real and everyone's been abused. But yeah, it's madness learning about all of these different things. And towards the end of the book, like right at the end, it did have a few quite recent updates. I think the last one was like 2022, where it was on about I think the head guy of like that group of psychologists, I think he was put on trial. I think he might have gone to prison. But I don't think the woman that like started this all off and was the woman that talked to all these kids, I don't think she even had anything done to her. She was really young. She came up with all these ideas, and there was also, it seemed like a bit of a conspiracy, not in that sort of word, but like all of the psychologists and people were all from this same group that all like got loads of money out of this as well, because they were all of these kids, like I don't know how many, double figures, all of these kids were going through this therapy for months and months and years and years and years, and that had to be paid for. So like they were getting loads of money out of these kids like being given trauma that didn't happen, but so much so that their brain believed it happened. So they had trauma thinking that all of these, that their parents had done all this abusive stuff to them. They had trauma thinking that they'd murdered kids and babies themselves. It's absolutely incredible and mind-blowing and madness. But yeah, that is why in the end I gave this book 4 stars, because the first half of it was quite slow and dragged a bit, but the actual meat and bones of what happened here is mind-blowing. And when it got to like going into stuff properly, madness. I probably missed out so much stuff, but yeah. Anyway, that's all the things that I read in January. I'm going to give you a little cat clip here, and then I'll talk about the 2 books that I bought or got. So yeah. Hi. Monts is loving his new bed. It's a big chunky. It also has a tunnel all the way around, so sometimes we've got Monts here, then we've got Ruger inside the tunnel, and then we've got Bibsy inside the tunnel. It's a great time, isn't it, Monts? But you have claimed the centre. So like I mentioned, got 2 books in January, might as well just haul it here. There's no point in doing a separate video. The first book was a gift. This is As Good As It Gets by Ramesh Ranganathan. This is life lessons from a reluctant adult, is the little side note, so there you go, that's what it's about. He does have another book straight out of Crawley, I want to say is that's where it's from, which is more of a biography. I've not read that one, but I would definitely read it, because I do like Ramesh. He's a comedian. If you don't know, if you're not from England, you might not recognise him, but he's a comedian, and this is like life lessons. It's just going to be, I feel like it's going to be a fun time. Like I've read James Acaster's Classic Scrapes, which is all like little stories and stuff, and yeah, I enjoy a comedian's non-fiction, if you will. So yeah, I've got that one. And the other one, this was an absolute great find. I found Wolfsong by TJ Klune in a charity shop in Lincoln. It's also, I was looking at it literally just before I started recording this, and I was looking at the spine like, oh, it's not even got a cracked spine, and then I realised it's actually an ARC, which is fine. I know you're like not meant to sell and buy ARCs. I bought it accidentally. But this book came out years ago, and then it was republished as a like proper published book rather than self-published. So I feel like reading the ARC is just going to be exactly the same as reading the book. I doubt anything changed because it was literally already released years ago. So yeah, very happy I found this one, because it's a book that I've been wanting to read for many years, since it was self-published, since before TJ Klune came out with like a traditionally published book. I've been interested in reading this, so boom. I have it on my Kindle. I got it randomly somewhere for free, but now I don't have to read it on my Kindle because I've got it here. And there we go. Those were all the books I read and hauled in January. Let me know down below anything you read in January. Have you read any of these 2 books that I've hauled? I feel like potentially Wolfsong might come up in March because of the roll of reads, because it's one of the host favourites, but we'll see. It might happen, it might not. It's quite chunky. But yeah, let me know down there. Do the things if you want, like if you want, comment if you want, subscribe if you want, bone if you want. And yes, I will be back at some point with another video.